Welcome to another episode on the Journeyman Co. On this episode, we are joined by Russell Earnshaw in our Chess Not Checkers edition. So welcome everybody, welcome to another episode, a new little concept we've got going where we will get coaches on to discuss certain topics around training, rugby and the game, etc. For 20 or 30 minutes. We'll ask them one simple question. But before we get into that, hello buddy, good to see you.
How's it, my booty? No, it's lekker. It's lekker. I think this is a great segment we're doing as well. It's very compressed and almost straight to the point and getting golden bits of nuggets there for us. So I know there's a few questions I want to ask coaches. So this is a segment for that, and I'm really excited. But you're looking good, Mike. Look like you put on a bit of muscle on the old shoulders there, boots. What's happening? What's new in your life?
Training hard, boy. Just training, coaching, staying ready. You know how it goes.
Yeah, there's a few things in the pipeline. I've obviously we've been speaking off camera, and I can't wait for that to come about. But looking good, buddy. It's nice to see you. This is pretty organic. We haven't actually seen each other for a couple. Well, it's been a week. The
Yeah.
last time. Freddie Burns was a good one. I really enjoyed chatting to him. He was really cool. It was nice. His storytelling is something else. I promise you. When I watched back the recording. He's such a good storyteller. He's a great storyteller. Good feedback from that one.
The feedback I've got as well is like people couldn't believe how honest it was and open. And we'll definitely get Fred on again because he's got so much to tell and share and give back, you know. And we've got a lot of people like that lined up. So they must just stay tuned and like and subscribe. If you can, support us as we continue to grow, and we'll continue to bring lessons and stories to your ears and your eyes if you watch on YouTube. But so tonight we've got Russell Earnshaw, obviously RFU coach developer, he's coached professionally, he's coached internationally. And the question we're going to ask him tonight to kick off this edition is how do you go about planning a training session? What's your content like? How long are you doing things for? What's your intensity like? So it'll be interesting to hear what he says about that, and hopefully people can learn from that. And if you have any questions that you'd like to hear from these coaches, just drop us a DM, and we'll try and make it happen for you. But anyway, let's kick it off with Russ.
Yeah, let's go. And just jumping in on that, I think these are the sort of questions, me going into coaching now, some of these answers are amazing. If listening tonight, I'm so intrigued by what Russ is going to share, because his mind is one of the more interesting ones in a coaching game, the open-mindedness of how he likes to play to space, how he likes to teach, how he likes to coach. And when you actually get into it and like I was away now, like we spoke about this on the last episode, when I was away with the Belgium Sevens, sometimes you need these sort of things and you forget very quickly how experience is so important, like having a toolbox, and on a drop of a dime, you need to be able to react and pull something out. And with experience, you just know what to do, what training session to do. Okay, we had a terrible week doing this. What are we going to do? What's going to counteract that? So these sort of things he'll probably ask us about 6 questions before I know him, but before he delivers the answer. Yeah, exactly. He's definitely one of those coaches, and he's been so creative around the social media part of what he does now. I don't know if you've watched some of his videos on Twitter or on LinkedIn, but he's so creative. The one we did with his daughter, Ilza, it's crazy. It's like, I loved it. I was blown away. And
I saw that one.
Yeah, I'm going to go into it with him and talk to him about that. And, I love the brain. I love the mind, how he works. It's incredible. So for me, again, he's my old coach. He's probably the first professional coach I ever had. And we really got on like a house on fire. I'd probably run through a brick wall for him, just because he treated his guys with so much respect. So yeah, here's the magic man here.
Yeah,
magic
right.
Man. Oi.
Good.
Good to see you, mate.
See you. So welcome, Russ. Good to have you back on the Journeyman Co podcast with our new, as Jeff likes to call it, Chess Not Checkers edition. We're just going to be asking you one simple question, and we'll discuss that for about 20 or 30 minutes, see what we get out of it. And it's great to have you back. So the question we're going to be discussing tonight, obviously we're all involved in coaching, is how to plan a training session. So how are you structuring your training sessions? What's the content looking like? What's the intensity looking like? And what kind of time are you working on? Now, I'm just going to preface that by saying I understand that a professional training session could be slightly different to a school training session, etc., etc. But we can just kind of give the basics to start off with and see where we get. And obviously sevens will be different, a little different to 50s.
Well, let's do that. Let's do a sevens for me. I'd love it to be a sevens session.
Oh, mate, you're so selfish trying to help out. Rather than help other coaches, you want to help yourself.
I'm sitting here with my book, but honestly, all I can say, your favorite type of session, because it's quite a vast question, isn't it? There's so many variables.
Well, I'll riff, and Matt, I really appreciate you coming in your vest, looking like you've been washed up on a beach.
He has.
I just come from the beach. I live 2 minutes from the beach.
He's living the life there in the south of France.
Yeah, with your friend Wilson.
No.
So that's a good question, and thanks for having me. And I guess context is everything. So as a teacher, so I, it might be that you spend a minute on the way to the pitch planning. As with some junior coaches the other day, and a guy said to me, so there's 4 of us, Rusty. I have 2 hours in the week where I can text them. I'm on the train. One guy can't do a Wednesday. One guy thinks this, one guy, and so like the context is always different, isn't it? If you're in a professional environment, you have way more time to kind of think about it, do it, get into the detail a little bit more. My experience, though, is that I'll often ask, any environment I go in, I'll tend to ask, like, what do you think planning is? When you're planning, what are your top 3 or 4 considerations, and rank them? And I'll get the coaches to do it separately, and then we'll see how aligned they are. They're rarely aligned. And I guess even before that, stuff starts with intention. So I was at a football club, a rugby club in the Northwest recently, and I got 2 of the under-16 coaches, separated them and said, like, this season, what's the top 3 things you want to achieve that isn't winning? So if you've had an amazing season, what's 1, 2, 3? And separated them, said, have a think about what it is. I'm going to get you to shout them out in 5 minutes. Number one guy shouts out equal playing time. The other guy shouts out scrimmaging. He might have been South African, Michael. He might have been South African. The other guy shouts out win the Cheshire Cup, which might not align with equal playing time. And the other guy shouts out lineouts. He's definitely South African at this point. So I think there's some stuff before you even start thinking about planning, like, what do we want to get out of this season? What's our goal for the season? And then I think you then dig into, I like questions for sessions. So I like the idea that a session title is a question. So how can we defend a lead with 10 minutes to go? A brilliant one, just watched the Olympic quarterfinals yesterday. And South Africa against New Zealand was epic. And it actually got me thinking a lot about, I wonder how often New Zealand have practiced being 5 yards from the try line and scoring against a blitz defence, because that's essentially the problem the game asked them. So how effective can we be at scoring quickly when we're only 5 yards from the opposition line and they got defenders on their feet? It might be other stuff like, how can we psychologically stay on top? It might be, and again, we were at Semper this week, and one of the coaching teams decided their question for the session was, how can every kid do something they didn't think was possible? So a question for a session, then you're enjoying that one, aren't you, Jeff? That's like tapped into your spirituality. So I think of it, I started like that, and then I think about the environment. And again, be it professional, be it school, be it club, then you've got to think, like, what's the environment I want to create? So I would have a couple of frameworks to help me with that. And the one we used with England was PACE, which we adapted to place. Dan Hughes' model around getting the best out of young people. So playful, loving, accepting, curious, empathetic, the behaviors of the adults. So let's start with us. How are we going to behave to make sure that we create the environment we want to create? And then I guess I then start to think, okay, so if the session is this, so let's take a 7 session, Jeff, let's go. the session is how can I'll give you a live example, because we had this again with New Zealand when we had a struggle against Fiji for quite a few games, then we came with her. So how can we beat Fiji? It was a game. And so we designed a game that was, how do we beat Fiji? And so, well, what does that game look like? So one of my first things I think about is, how do I create the need? So what does the Fiji game look like? Well, the Fiji team has one extra player, because it feels like they've got one extra player. You're probably rewarded defensively if you can create a ruck, because they're trying to do the exact opposite. The pitch isn't that deep, because essentially once they line break you, they're probably going to score. So actually, you're probably playing a pitch that might be 40 meters deep. And so you just, I guess I start to think of it like that. So I start with the question, then I go, what does the practice design look like? So what's the game we want to play? And I'm a big fan of levels. Jeff, you might not remember it. We used to play a game called Going for Gold with England years ago, where there was different levels and you had to create, one ruck, then two rucks, then three rucks, and it was a defensive.
I remember that. Yes.
And you start on your own line, because that creates the need for you to go forward. So if you start on the halfway line, you can probably get away with some stuff to start with, and you might end up defending your line, but we would always start on our own line. So I would start with my practice design first. I've got a massive bias towards coaching through games, only because lots of the other stuff rubs huge amounts of the game out. So if we're playing sevens and we're doing static passing, well, we're rubbing out, getting into position, scanning, sharing information, deciding when to leave to go and get the ball, deciding whether I run, kick, or pass. There's loads we're missing out on. And so I've got a real bias towards coaching through games, but finding the right level is the most important thing. So if you're coaching a under nines team, you probably won't have equal numbers, because then it becomes a physical competition. You might go, actually, really want these kids to pass lots and share the ball. So actually, we're going to be overloaded in attack. We're going to be 6 attackers and we're going to be 4 defenders. So that'll create the need for us to pass the ball to space. So I would start with practice design, and then I would just start to think about my coach behaviors. Something I've probably got better at recently is just getting rid of refereeing and scoring. So it just draws your attention to the wrong things. You will be looking at the ball, because that's where lots of the kind of decisions for referees happen. And if you keep score, then you've got something else on your mind that you could be doing other stuff. So I'll quite quickly get rid of that stuff. And, I might go, freeze, cool, Michael, Jeff, in 3 seconds, I'm going to get you to shout out what you think the score is in the game. And if you don't know it, your team score is going to be zeroed. I will create the need for people to keep score. So, So I've gone from practice design, getting the right level, to then going, okay, what am I going to be doing as a coach? If we just put the camera on me, where am I going to be standing? Who do I think I'm going to be speaking to? Which players are going to find this session hard? What do I need to do with them? Which players are going to find it easy? How do we stretch them? And then the other hack for me, for any coach, is just having a whiteboard next to the pitch with, 2 things. I'll generally have the session on, because it'll allow me to pull in, okay, 1 player from each team. Come on, I'm going to explain the next part to you. You got 30 seconds to tell your team. So it'll allow me to develop things like communication. But also, we might have players with their focuses on it. So if Marcus was on, I remember there's a period of time where Marcus was just trying to be more focused in his training sessions. So for him to put it on the whiteboard, share it with people to help him, and might be me, might be the other players, allows way more individualized coaching, which ultimately is what we're trying to do, if I'm honest. So we have team sessions in sevens, but the reality is, Jeff, your players with Belgium are at different bus stops, aren't they? So you might want 1 player who's working really hard on their support play off the ball, and you might have another player who's working on their communication, or another player who's working on their scanning. And so how to coach that? Let's say you have 20 people in a session. That's really hard. So I think we need to take away the assumption that the coach does the coaching, and have players just be willing to take more ownership of their own development. I did speak to a Premiership coach recently, and I said I just wouldn't let them on the pitch if they didn't come with intention of what they wanted to get better. And he was like, "Yeah, but the head coach won't let me not let them on the pitch." But I think it's ridiculous that professional players are turning up without intention of how they're going to get better. So we just ended up in this world, haven't we? So I guess that's the start point for me: practice design, then my coach behaviours. If you work with other coaches in the sevens, Jeff, you'll probably have some co-coaching roles. So with England sevens, me and Ben would have been like, Ben would have done attack, I would have probably done defence, and you kind of go against each other sometimes. With England 18s, we might have had someone whose primary focus was off the ball, or coaching individuals, or breakdown stuff if we felt that was important. So you then just work out how you're going to work together as co-coaches. And for me, that's quite a, I haven't had that many coaches that I feel like I've been on the same page as, just really intuitively. And so I think that takes a bit of work as well. And then my last thing that I involve, and I definitely work on, we'll bounce this stuff around in a second as well, is what are the coaches trying to get better at? So if there was one more column in the kind of planning sheet, what's Jeff working on? Oh, well, I'm working on my feedback, Rusty, and just being able to give more feedback in the moment. And Michael's working on, actually, I'm pretty good at attack. I'm actually want to go and spend a bit of time using the defence to set problems for my attack. And Rusty might be working on something that I know I need to work on, is checking in with the other coaches more regularly, because I can very often just, get excited and go and coach on my own and forget there's other coaches there. There's a point history of planning for me, and I'm sure it'll change. The last thing, I only have 4 or 5 games I play. So I don't have loads of games. I don't spend ages on the practice design, because I know I've got really good games that I can find the appropriate level on, and then I can coach. The reality is, my sense is lots of coaches spend way too long, and there's obviously lots of stuff out there around, practices, drills, whatever you want to call it, that you can do. But my advice is find 4 or 5 that work for you. Give them names, have levels to them, and go from there. Way more likely to get transfer, way more likely to get more out of your training, because every time you introduce a new game, the players, it takes cognitive load. They have to learn the new game. And, that might be 20, 30 minutes before they've worked out the game, quite frankly.
First of all, I'm jumping in. It must be because you're my first professional coach, but that's what I do. That's what I believe in. Games and playing. And when you tell me this, it's like I get a great feeling, like a feeling of, okay, I feel like I'm as a coach, a young coach coming through, you question yourself a lot. I've gone through my first double tournament in Europe, and everything I believe in is what you're saying, playing games and learning through those and having challenges within those games. And also finding struggles with introducing new games. These are all things that I'm experiencing slowly. You understand? And also, another point is finding yourself trying to get better as a coach. So questioning, like having Crackers there in Hamburg, and him giving me a 3-point bullet point sort of thing of what went tits up and what you need to work on. And I was like, I'll never forget it. It's just like being a player again with Cracks. And I was like, yeah, but where's the positive stuff, Cracks?
He was giving you, Crackers was giving you the shit sandwich without the bread, wasn't he?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I know Cracks so well. So it was like, thanks for that. Actually, that's great. And I love that about you. I love that. And it makes me want to have a session with you. It makes me the best games. They were honestly.
Yeah. So even a game, so if you think, let's say we played a game of sevens. Let's just imagine we played 7 aside as our practice, which you'll do lots of with your sevens practice. 7 aside isn't always the same. So if you played it on half the pitch, it's a different game. If you brought it in narrower, it's a different game. If every time you fed the ball on their left-hand side of the pitch, it's a different game, because they're generally passing more off their left-hand side. If the scoring system was 5 for a try, but 10 if you scored off a kick, it's a different game. So, that's why, again, for me, I have 1 or 2 games that I'll go, okay, this session, I'm going to do a bit of rondo. I'm probably going to play a bit of park the bus. And actually, but then I think about it and I think about, well, how long is the game? all of those things. What's the score at the start of the game? Or do we start 0-0? Do we start 7-0? Do we give options of? Do we give players options of? Do they start up or do they start down? So we can create lots of different things with the same kind of game format of just 7 versus 7. And then the other thing I do put a lot of emphasis on is probably how I start a session and how I end a session. I think this ability to kind of connect sessions together is vital. That's why I like levels. So last week's session, we got to level 7. Like, do you want to master level 6? Do you want to spend a bit more time on level 7? Or do we start on level 9, level 10? Just get a bit spicier. I've got a couple of brilliant examples. I'll give shout outs to Mike Donaldson at Arsenal and Gary McDermott at Forest Green, who've got just ends of sessions that I've never seen anything like it. So Gary's one's like 18-year-old lads just swan diving into big muddy puddles because they're so pleased they won the game. Mike's is all of the lads at Arsenal running across the corner, knee sliding like 30 lads, and just that joy at the end of a session. Now, again, sometimes I might want to finish a session on something that doesn't go so well, because then people go away and talk about it. So we did that with England. We played Scotland away, and we were like, we're probably going to win this game. Actually, these lads have had a lot of success. We're going to create a session that's so frustrating, and we're going to put a stopwatch on it, and we're going to see if we can make them stay frustrated, chatting to each other for at least 8 minutes. And again, if you're a Sunday morning coach, you might go, I'm going to create the best ending to a session so that at the end, I'm struggling to get the kids off the pitch, because they go, no more. And again, I've had a couple of mates who've had interviews, and I've said, look, if it's going well, try and stop the session 10 minutes early. And just go, I think, lads, if we stop 10 minutes early, and they go, no. So that almost like thinking about that type of stuff. And again, how do we start? So if I'm coaching football, I'll generally go, cool, Jeff, Mike, go rock, paper, scissors. Whoever wins gets a penalty to start the game. And I might then go, and again, we might play 7-a-side, but if the first try is worth double, then that's a different game, isn't it? Because you get a quick start. And if the last try is worth double, then you could still be in the game, even though you might not normally be in the game at the end. So I think a lot about cool scoring systems, if I'm honest.
I'm going to give you a scenario right now, and it's exactly this situational play. And I'm going to give you the scenario, Georgia quarterfinal. So Georgia now qualify for the Challenger series, and they become like, the story for us is they become like our arch nemesis. We've got them in this quarterfinal. We've qualified number 1. My first European tournament. We beat GB, we beat Spain, we beat Latvia, and we get Georgia. We get into the last play of the game, and it's been a ding-dong battle, 7-all, and they get a yellow card. We have the ball in their half. It's a scrum, and I've never experienced this as a coach. Of course, my first time, but the boys just didn't know what to do. So, we get the penalty, we call a scrum. Okay, so let's go scrum against the Georgians, of course, one of the strongest teams in the tournament. And we're going to have a scrum. And I'm sitting on the side of the pitch. They're scrumming next to me. And my communication is zero. I'm like, all I'm doing is shouting. When I look back at it, and I was almost, I think it was a reflection of me a little bit. We just went and didn't know how to compete in the situation. Because we didn't talk about it. We didn't practice it. We didn't have games where it was final play, a 6v7. This is 30 seconds on the clock. And for me, it was like, I took a photo of it after reviewing it and everything. And I never want a situation like that again. Or if it is, the players are prepared through games, through situational rugby, that they know what to do and they can compete in that environment. Because that energy that I hear about Arsenal scoring, the feeling of that's taking away pressure and actually enjoyment. It's you're not playing through failure. You're playing through the feeling of enjoyment and success and creativity. Those positive feelings, instead of being when pressure grabs onto you. And I think, honestly, now coaching and being involved for such a short period of time, that's for me how you take away pressure. That's how you take away fear, is by letting players experience that day in, day out through games and through situational almost
Well, the game judges your training. So the game judged you. You just said you hadn't done it in training. So you're quite unlikely to achieve it in a game if you haven't done it in training. And of course, you can't cover every single scenario. So again, we had a similar conversation with Clarkey where they had a major final against Fiji and it was 5-7. So New Zealand had 2 players in the bin and it got to extra time, 5-7. And there was a toss and I didn't see who won it. And New Zealand kicked off, Fiji got the ball, they kicked long, Fiji got the ball and they scored. And I was like, oh, did you lose the toss? And he went, no, they won the toss, but chose to kick. I was like, why would you choose to kick 5-7? Like, just blows my mind. Or at least kick long. You might at least kick to compete. But anyway, it was, and again, you can't cover every scenario. Like, but this spirit of problem solving that is vital. And again, when I'm being provocative, I go, you're not coaching decision making unless you have scoring time. So in that moment you spoke about there, with 30 seconds left, they've got one person in the bin. This is the score. Then that's decision making. If you didn't have the time or the score, you wouldn't be coaching decision making. You'd just be doing some kind of activity, wouldn't you? And then the other thing that fits into all of this, 2 other important aspects that are important to think about. One is the psych stuff. So how do we help players stay in the moment, and coaches, judging by you on the sideline? Because sometimes you're like, you're either frozen on the sideline or you're freaking out. And then also, how do we help, bring to life the ball out of play moments? So there'll have been, before that scrum, let's say there was a 20-second period of time where your players had the ability to, and my framework is see it, share it, solve it. So see it. Okay, lads, we're sick. We need to score. We've got 30 seconds left. They've got 6. We're going to go scrum. This is the move we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. And then we can solve the problem. But again, we often don't focus on those moments in training. And often as coaches, we're leading those moments. Cool, everyone in. No, not everyone in. Like, the players need to call that stuff. Like, they need to solve that stuff. And again, I'm not, you're just starting out there with that team, Jeff, but their ability to problem solve, their ability to get together in a game, either in a huddle or like while they're passing one another, or while there's a scrum, or while they're waiting for a kick, and problem solve is vital. And for me, you've got to shine a light on that stuff. If you don't, you'll end up stressed man on the sideline.
Yeah, that's so
scenario stuff in England when you were there. So, I mean, we'd have a real day just almost devoted to scenarios.
Yeah.
You've touched on obviously how important scenarios are, and I completely agree. So you guys have spoken about that. I have 2 questions based on what you've said. The first one is around practice design in the games. Now, there might not be a right or wrong answer to this, but it's about your games in particular. Do you design the game based on how you want to play, or do you design the game based on how your opposition play, or could it be both?
I would design, how I think about playing, it's a couple of different contexts here is, one is in development, if you play rugby like South Africa do, then you're not going to develop skillful players, quite frankly. So in development, it's probably slightly different. You've got to think about, it's slightly differently. If I'm in performance, then I look at the strength of my players, quite frankly. And then you also need to think about games that, I guess that'd be like the Fiji game for New Zealand, games that give problems to opponents that they're not used to. So, you look at how Italy played against England a few years ago and defended in that way that kind of shook England and had James Haskell struggling to know the rules of the game. So I think about it as individuals. If Jeff played on the wing, it would be different if Rusty played on the wing. I would defend differently. I would offer way less in attack. And so to base it upon like numbers on shirts as opposed to individuals. But yeah, you've also got to think like, especially if you're not the best team in the competition. So I would imagine, Jeff, let's think about it with Belgium. You've probably gone, okay, let's have a look at our team. What have we got? Have we got speed? Have we got big forwards? Okay, we've got big forwards. Okay, well, we're probably going to compete on kickoffs. Or if you're South Africa, you'll kick long on kickoffs. They don't have loads of big fellas playing in their sevens team, so they'll often kick long and they'll back their physical stuff and their energy around defence. You've then probably also gone, okay, who are we playing against? Okay, playing against these teams, so we want to do this. Playing against Georgia, we probably want to keep the ball out of contact. They're pretty good there. And to be honest, like we probably want to have maybe a bit more line speed against Georgia because they got big lads and we want to go meet them before they get too much momentum. So I think it's a bit of both. But then also for me, you've got to be thinking about where's the game going? What's going to surprise your opponent? What's going to give them problems that they've not trained against? Because the reality is, if you give them problems they've trained against, they're probably going to deal with it, aren't they? That's the reality of 15-a-side at the moment. People cannot deal with the scrum problem that South Africa give them. They can't deal with it.
That's
Ireland
definitely.
didn't do too bad, to be fair.
You what?
Ireland didn't do too badly.
No, they're the team that are probably closest, aren't they? Because they're able to deal with the scrum. And it looks like the Kiwi scrum is getting a bit better at the moment as well. So that'll be interesting. But the reality is, it's really hard to beat South Africa if you can't like deal with their scrum problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. And then obviously just leading into my second question, you said something that I thought was really interesting about coaching behaviors and coaches thinking about their behaviors before they, walk onto a training pitch or how they want to behave in a session towards the players. Now, when I think of that, I think of like a Lee Blackett. I know you're a big fan of Lee. I myself am a big fan of Lee. Lee was always just constant, never too high, never too low. Then you get coaches that, sometimes give you a massive kick up the arse or they're really emotional. You hear about the stories of Eddie Jones, how he handled the Japanese team, where he said, okay, there's no training today because he wanted to see if the boys, this was obviously leading up to the 2015 World Cup, if they took ownership and went out and trained. So when you talk about coaching behaviors, just quickly, like sum that up. What does that mean? Does a coach need to be really intentional about how he behaves session to session? Or does he potentially act a bit differently some sessions to put players under pressure maybe, or to test them a bit more, or, to put them in, yeah, exactly, that psychological aspect, because I know from experience, sometimes a coach can be really nice and soft. And then it eventually happens that players take, they take over because there are a lot of alpha male personalities in the game. So how important is it for a coach to kind of stay ahead of that psychology and keep his players guessing with his behaviors?
And interestingly, some of my favourite years were when the players took over from the coach. Look, I think about be yourself with skill. So I wouldn't ask any coach to be someone they're not. For Lee Blackett to behave like, Richard Cockrell or Sam Vesti to behave like Eddie Jones would just be weird, if I'm honest. So be yourself. But yeah, of course you've got to be intentional because the reality is you're not coaching robots. So you're coaching individuals. So like every day as a coach, you're noticing, so Jeff, you're coaching Belgium, you're noticing stuff on the pitch, you're noticing stuff off the pitch, and you're making decisions around how do I interact with this player? Oh, that player's turned up. It looks a bit down today. Okay, like with that player, how would I normally what do I think is going to be helpful in this moment? And then I look at like how they interact with that. If I've just got one or two like blunt hammers, then I'm not going to be that effective at getting, the best out of individuals. Now, the other side of that is, I guess, a bit of what you said there, Michael. Like, you've also got to work out what's your empty chair as a coach. So, what's the stuff I currently can't do that I need to be able to do? That's why coaching challenges are important. So, I know lots of coaches that would avoid hard conversations. The flip is, I know lots of coaches that would do them in a really unhelpful manner. So I had lots of feedback from coaches that wasn't that helpful because I didn't leave the meeting that hopeful. I didn't really feel like I had clarity on what would help me move forward. Versus I had lots of coaches that, when we were at Rotherham, they used to wait until everyone left on a Wednesday, put the team sheet up, and then you might see it on a Thursday or a Friday. Like they didn't want to tell the players who wasn't playing. They never told you, ever, in 4 years. Like, so those kind of, that just completely erodes trust for me. And so I guess you make those decisions all the time, don't you? As a coach, you notice stuff, you make those choices. Now, of course, if you don't have the skill set to be able to do, let's call it a hard or an important or a caring conversation in multiple ways, then that's probably suboptimal. So I guess that's why I believe in coach development, isn't it? Like we want to help coaches get better at stuff. You having crackers on the side of the pitch, and because crackers is very different to you, Jeff. Like, would be a brilliant perspective for you to have. Like, he's giving you stuff you can get better at. He's sharing stuff he's noticed, and he's probably giving you a slightly different perspective because he's a really different person to you. You got loads of similarities. I think you would share similar values, but actually, I think you'd be very different in how you would live those things. Although crackers is softening with old age.
I don't know about that. I'm sure he is.
Jeff, you'll appreciate this question, I guess. But don't you find, and obviously Jeff and I, we love our, all kinds of sports. I feel like the best coaches, their teams reflect their personality in many aspects. If you look at like Alex Ferguson with Man United, he was very blue collar tough. That was what the team was like. Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, he was very disciplined, do your job. That's what the Patriots were like. If you look at Russ, it's all about fighting for a cause. That's what the Springboks are like. And Phil Jackson with the Bulls and the Lakers, he was big into Zen, focus, and those teams, they came up clutch every time it mattered because they were calm and collected under pressure. So I feel like the best coaches in the game are able to get their teams to buy into them as human beings as well. And they reflect in how they play and handle themselves. Would that be a fair and accurate assessment, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's some people who are probably super coaches who could probably coach in lots of different contexts and get the best out of whoever it is. I think the best coaches understand where the best environment for them is. So Lee and the way he would want to play, Wasps would have suited that. And also the flip of that is organizations that hire their coaches correctly. Like you must have, both of you will have gone, that coach has gone there. That's a bit weird, isn't it? Like, what are they thinking? Like, this is going to last about 6 months. I know, honestly, I look at so many rugby appointments and think, well, that's not going to go that well, is it? Like, because that coach can't coach that way.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. I think even though all those players, I mean, all those coaches we've named, the one thing that the reason why it mirrors them is because they have complete control of who's coming into the building. So they're selecting people that you talk about, the first question you asked Russ is, it was all about what players does he have? What strengths do they have? When a Rassie Erasmus walks through and he's been there for 5-6 years, he has complete control of who's in the squad. I mean, even look at Ivan Russ now. He's a great young player. He does 2 or 3 things against Portugal and he's out the squad because he doesn't fit into what Rassie believes, or, behind the scenes doesn't see this guy as being, this is just an example. Bill Belichick will be the same. But I think that's a lot of these guys have worked their way up the ladder. They've done the work to get to this point where they can have their fingerprints all over their.
Yeah, and think about also, so you think about Sir Alex at Man United and how important the academy was and the people in the academy, so players were coming through. Probably the same with Sam Vesti. Like, Sam has gone away, learned to be a brilliant coach. He's at Saints. They've got some DNA around how they play the game. Their academy with Mark Hopley completely aligned on that stuff. What they do with their young players is, remarkable. And then they have, 18, 19-year-olds that can come and smash it in the first team. Toulouse is the classic, like yes. DNA throughout the club, the DNA of the coaches, the DNA from the academy, the way they play the game that causes problems for opponents that don't play like that. No surprise, the only team that really and they didn't get close in the final, but Bordeaux, again, are the team that play the closest to Toulouse. So they would have a chance of perhaps winning that competition. So, yeah, again, just alignment is, and alignment isn't like everyone having the same goals. Alignment is like principles. Alignment is like values and behaviors. Alignment is like appointing people that we know like fit the DNA of this club. Like, it's absolutely vital, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, a selection is a topic we can get on to next time.
Next
We'll do
time.
selection. We'll do selection next time.
Yeah, so obviously we said this was going to be a nice, short, sharp segment, and I feel like this can go on for hours. But yeah, I think we should just, you know, tie a little ribbon around it and carry on next time.
Well
Do you have
said.
any closing statements, Jeffy boy?
First of all, what you're doing in the landscape, your creativity, Russ, your social media now, it is so cool. I'm so proud to have worked with you and to follow you in your coaching and stuff. Like, I think your ideas and the way you see the landscape of coaching and helping young people and humans achieve greater things. I'm all about that purpose. You know me as a human, so you know I live for that, and I look up to that. And I just wanted to say that that video you did with Elsa, your daughter, was unbelievable. I know I shared you a message, but I just thought, if you haven't watched it, guys, go check it out. It's one of the coolest things. I thought it was really cool.
Don't tag my daughter in because she gets really stressed that her dad's
Yeah,
embarrassed.
don't do that. But I really love what you're doing. And as a young coach coming through, yeah, I'm always watching your things and what you're doing. So thanks. And thanks for coming on. I love listening to you with my notebook and writing stuff down, as I always have.
I definitely think, yeah, we'll do this again, Russ, because obviously, like, there's so much gold, but you know, we can talk about this for hours. There's so much to unpack. So we'll try and make it a regular thing.
Planning is like it's not that, again, I just don't think it's that simple. I think lots of stuff we chat about, you know, you talk about your context, Jeff, chat about other contexts, you know, Michael, you're in, you know, doing some stuff in schools, you're doing stuff in clubland as well. Like, it's different, isn't it? You train at Anik, you might train 2 nights a week, or that's different to professional. If you train at school, you might have had 4 hours of lessons before. Like, everything's contextual.
Yeah, no, well, definitely we'll keep unpacking it as the season and the year goes along, Russ. But yeah, good first start. Thanks so much for giving us your time, and we'll speak to you soon, brother.
Cheers, lads.
Cheers.
Look after yourselves.